Look what I have. Should I read this?
All right, America, check it out. So I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw somebody tweeted about this issue of George magazine. Yes. Yes, and you see on the cover here how it says, Bill Gates talks to John Kennedy about Murdoch, money, and world domination. Yeah, so let's check it out. Let's look in the table of contents. John Kennedy Jr. is right here next to me. I have a shrine of him that I'm working on because he was a visionary. So let's see, where's this article? Ah, 78. And there's a sexy picture of John Kennedy looking at shady ass Bill Gates. Can you see that? Look at him, just looking at shady ass Bill Gates. The fucking shady ass fucking Bill fucking Gates. All right, page 78, let's do this. I'm gonna read this article to you because we all need to know what's going on. And you know I'm a big fan of John F. Kennedy Jr. Can you tell? Now, I love John Kennedy Jr., but baby doll, where are the page numbers? His designer was a genius guy. Genius. The magazine is a work of art, but I don't see no page numbers. 70. Here we go. Here we go, kids. Here we go. Oh, here's this motherfucker now. All right, Bill Gates of Mouse and Man. How do I get in my? There we go. Censor. All right, check it out, people. In the United States, great wealth is often acquired with great speed, but no one has ever amassed so much so quickly as has Bill Gates. Already there's a problem. The 41-year-old co-founder, this is in 1997, the 41-year-old co-founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of Microsoft Corporation. With a personal fortune in excess of $20 billion, Gates presides over a company whose net worth in excess of $100 billion is more than 10 times the gross domestic product of Zaire. Not only that, his name has become synonymous with the information revolution. His achievement is all the more astonishing when you consider that the young Gates was sure enough about his vocation in 1975 to drop out of Harvard University in his sophomore year and team up with his high school friend Paul Allen to lay the foundations for the Microsoft Corporation. It's hard to believe that the calm, modest, boyish-looking... This motherfucker never looked like a boy. He always looked like an old-ass dork. Boyish-looking Gates, the opposite of the stereotypical swashbuckling entrepreneur of old, has transformed not only the computer industry, but also how millions now work and communicate with each other in the business community. However, there are those who say Microsoft, the epitome of the modern company, has adopted a predatory business practice of old-fashioned industrial behemoths such as General Motors, IBM, blah, blah, that Microsoft's share of the software market is approaching a dangerous monopoly. Well, you don't say. In 1995, Microsoft had to drop its plans to take over software producer Inuit amid accusations that the acquisition would represent a breach of antitrust legislation. Indeed, during the course of my interview, the only occasion that disturbed the placid exterior of Microsoft's chairman was when I brought up this issue. So the only time he got upset was when somebody said, "You're a motherfucking goddamn tyrant." With his software programs, a ubiquitous feature of offices and homes in the Western world, Gates is now hoping to alter the practice of the perception of government. Did you read that? With his software programs, a ubiquitous feature of offices and homes in the Western world, Gates is now hoping to alter that practice and alter the practice and the perception of government. So he's in 1997 saying that he wants to change the way we see government, and he also wants to change how government works. In Gates' view, after creating software that is in every single office computer, basically, and home. After the practice, blah, 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 okay. Sorry, I lost my place. In Gates' view, so long as government is prepared to embrace the information revolution, then we can all expect government to become smaller, more accessible, and infinitely more accountable. Yet there are those who believe that Gates' vision for the future, a computer-driven democracy in which the individual liberated by technology will be self-sufficient, might easily lead to the scenarios predicted by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World or George Orwell in 1984. Far from connecting people to each other, Gates' critics allege, the computer age will herald an era of social alienation. A world where everything can be acquired or communicated via one's workstation, and where there will be little need to participate in what we understand to be civic life. I'm going to read that again for you. There are those who believe Gates' vision for the future, a computer-driven democracy, in which the individual liberated by technology will be self-sufficient, might easily lead to the scenarios predicted by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World or George Orwell in 1984. Far from connecting people to each other, Gates' critics allege the computer age will herald an era of social alienation, social distancing, a world where everything can be acquired or communicated via one's workstation or home or self-made prison cell, where there will be little need to participate in what we understand to be civic life, going outside, going to rallies, going to elections, voting. Worse still, it might allow government to pry more effectively into our lives. Tell Julian Assange I said what's up. Tell Edward Snowden I said what's up. As I walk through the Microsoft compound campus in Redmond, Washington, just outside Seattle, it's the only city people move to so they can be closer to nature, as a writer once joked. I couldn't help noticing a utilitarian quality about the place. Here, Gates is known simply as Bill, and there's a collegiate feel to the buildings. As for the people who work for Bill Gates, they walk around looking relaxed and just fine. Some earnest Microsoft employees insist on wearing shorts year-round, regardless of the temperature outside, because they're so chill and relaxed. But there's also an air, or they're robots and they don't fucking feel temperature. But there's also an air of overwhelming purposefulness. We're purposeful. We've got to get everything socially distant. You are less likely to find a tie or a suit hanging on the back of a door than a sleeping bag for cat naps during those long northwestern nights, programming the next generation of Microsoft software. Just how far the appearance of the place matched the temperature of its maker, I would only learn after I entered Building 8 and climbed to Floor 2, where the chairman of Microsoft has his surprisingly modest office. Who are you? I am number 2. Who is number 1? You are number 6. John Kennedy asks, there's a lot of speculation these days about how the internet will change our lives. I'm particularly interested in how you think it will change politics and people's interaction with the government. Bill Gates. There's an opportunity to improve politics and democracy when you have an advance in communication technology. The internet is a tool that lets you find information in a much better way than anything else. Historically, most tools of communication were either broadcast, which meant your material had to appeal to millions and millions of people, or personal and able to address only a very small audience. But the internet provides a single individual with access to virtually unlimited information on any given topic. And John Kennedy asks him, how can that improve the political process? Because John's trying to improve the political process. And then Bill Gates says, well, let's say they're cutting $5 billion from some program in the budget. Most people don't have enough background to know whether this is a wise move or not. They don't know the key political issues, what the trade-offs are, or how this particular budget item has been spent historically. With the internet, not only can you take that news item and have it linked to background information, but you can also reach out Pardon me while I turn the page. You can also reach out and find other people who are interested in the issue. The internet is scalable in the sense that if something really catches your eye, you can become as educated and as involved in the subject as you want to be. So John Kennedy says, so one of the things that the internet has changed is the dynamic between elected officials and their constituents. Suddenly, the folks in Washington aren't the only ones with access to all the relevant information on a given issue. Bill Gates says, clearly elected officials are more accountable now. For example, if there's a big vote in Congress, I can quickly find out exactly how my congresspeople voted, and even what he or she has to say. You cannot get that level of detailed information in a national news article. About 40% of U.S. homes have personal computers now, and that's rising. So the implications of this kind of accountability are significant. Notice the phrasing of that. The implications of this kind of accountability are significant. That's like the signaling, like, all right, we're going to have to pay for some of the shit we do, so get ready, because now these people can actually search for dirt on us with this internet. So John Kennedy says, constituents can now swamp their representatives with data as opposed to the other way around. Well, it must be pretty hard and then Bill Gates says, well, it must be pretty hard with the paper mail nowadays because people try to bombard a congressperson's office with various opinions. Electronically, it's a lot easier to ignore, delete. It's a lot easier to bombard them. In parentheses, I'm saying bombard them. Electronically, it's a lot easier, period. Congresspeople can use email as a sort of poll to see how many people were there for something or how many people were against it. Although I feel sorry for the person who reads the president's email because I'm often copied on the same junk email. Did you hear that? Okay, this is what Bill Gates says. I feel sorry for the person who has to read the president's email because I'm often copied on the same junk email. So he thinks our letters are junk mail. That sounds like Ross Perot's notion of a direct democracy. Is that where we're headed? John Kennedy asks him. Bill Gates answers, in the future, direct democracy will be feasible. An extreme example would be to say, on a weekly basis, we'll take an issue and have everybody vote on it. But personally, I think representative democracy is better. Elected representatives can be a lot more thoughtful. They have the time to listen to both sides. They have the time to listen, so that's why they work you to death, so you don't have the time to listen to both sides of an issue and often come up with the non-obvious solution, the non-obvious thing, the thing that comes up in the shadow, the thing that doesn't actually help us. We ask for the obvious shit, the shit we need. They find out a non-obvious solution. I'm sorry, I'm digressing. In the future, Bill Gates says, we'll have to choose representative democracy, not because it's the only system available, but because we believe it's the best approach available. Not because it's the only system available, but because who is we? Because we believe it's the best approach available. Now, John doesn't follow up and say, who's we, motherfucker? John, I'm talking to my shrine. John, why didn't you ask him, who the fuck is we? In your book, The Road Ahead, this is probably all by mail anyway. No, I don't know. Maybe they did meet. In your book, The Road Ahead, you describe people becoming more self-sufficient through technology. You'll say it will allow people to eliminate many of the tedious routines of everyday life, like going out and voting. Sorry, that's me digressing. What are the implications for our government? How will the burgeoning electronic community engage our national community? See, community change our national community. Is government being rendered obsolete? Interesting. So Bill Gates says, I don't think there's much that the government does that you can eliminate altogether. Certainly technology will make the government a lot more efficient. In the future, instead of filling out paper forms or standing in line and talking to somebody in a governmental department, people will simply go online. That's no accountability. So the government can be smaller than it is right now. Republican bullshit. But it's not dramatic. I mean, if it's not like if you say, oh, this is the world of the internet, let's get rid of the VA hospitals. Don't get rid of the hospitals. So how do you respond to the argument that the cost of this technology, of this technological self-sufficiency, is the loss of our traditional sense of community? Did you see that? How do you respond to the argument that the cost of this technological self-sufficiency is the loss of our traditional sense of community? If you can get everything you need through your phone or TV, you lose those kinds of human exchanges that keep us connected as citizens. Do you see what John is understanding? It cuts both ways. Say that I'm from Israel and I want to listen to a radio broadcast from my homeland. Today you go on the internet and boom, you're there. No matter where you're located, you can maintain contact with any cultural group you belong to. On the other hand, physical communities were really primary when we were all just farming together and there were no telephones and no books. As you make the world a smaller place, ties to people in your proximity are paradoxically reduced. But those physical communities impose cultural standards in a stronger way than when you are free of those constraints and don't have that kind of attachment. But I'm going to read that again for you. In the age of social distancing, what Bill Gates was trying to create in the future. But those physical communities impose cultural standards in a stronger way than when you are free of those constraints and don't have that kind of attachment to society he's talking about, to your family, to your friends that you're not allowed to see anymore. Okay, so John asks him, will online communities ever replace physical communities altogether? Bill Gates answers, it's nonsense to say that people are just going to sit home and use their computers, but people shouldn't underestimate how much we are going to improve the nature of that computer experience. There will be talking 3D images of yourself that will enable you to sit and converse with people, play games with people, and a lot of neat things. We will never replace the idea of, let's go on a picnic together, or let's climb a mountainside together. In fact, as technology increases our efficiency, we will have extra time to engage in leisure activities with one another. Let's take shopping as an example. Sometimes shopping is purely utilitarian. I need to get soap, so I will get on the internet, type in soap, and the soap gets delivered. But sometimes shopping is an experience with a bunch of people, and when you want to window shop and all that, in no way does the computer mean you are not going to make that choice, unless the government says you can't leave your house. John asks, do you think that people who are disposed to experiment with technology have a kind of distinct political orientation or identity? Bill Gates says, well, there are a lot of people involved with technology who are very optimistic about what technology will provide. They tend to think there's got to be a way of structuring incentives so to already greatly reduce government's involvement. Government of the people, for the people, by the people. Government involvement means people involvement. So you will probably find a lot more libertarians in the technology sector than anywhere else. And John asks him, what about people on the internet? And then Bill Gates says, the internet has grown enough now. Sorry, it's the middle of the night. I put on lipstick for you. The internet has grown enough now that you find people of all political stripes out there. I think the internet represents the future. That's why you had Bob Dole giving out his website. I gotta go to page 101 now. Let's see if I can find it. Bill Gates is next to Bill Maher in this part of the magazine. Interesting, right? Bill. Dollar bill, y'all. Bill Gates. Why Ross Perot is giving out his website at every debate. Every politician wants to be associated with the future. There's no country where I've gone where there hasn't been interest among the top political leaders sitting down and talking with me. Part of the legitimate issue of talking about how their country can exploit technological advances, and part of it is just trying to associate themselves with technology and the bright future that comes with technology. What do you see as government's role in developing the internet? Bill Clinton has drawn analogies between the information superhighway and Dwight D. Eisenhower's highway building program in the 50s. The highway analogy would be would suggest that the government should be deeply involved. The government built the highways, but in the case of the internet, no one is suggesting that the government needs anything to do with it, anything of the kind. Whenever you have something new like this, it's best for the government to sort of sit back and see how it develops and see where there are problems. Fine. The government can step in. For example, some people said, let the government come in and set standards on the internet so all these systems that are formatted differently will work together. Thank goodness the government didn't choose to do that, because the de facto standards have evolved, are working super, super well. So I agree with him on that one thing. So to date, the government's role in getting standards has been quite modest. It's a lot. They're so modest. They're so modest. So then John says, but aren't some new laws necessary to deal with this new world? Bill Gates says, it's always surprising how well old concepts carry over into the new medium. It's overly idealistic to act like, oh, the internet is the one place where people should be able to do whatever they wish, present child pornography, do scams, libel people, steal copyrighted material. Society's values have not changed fundamentally just because it's an internet page. Take copyright. Sure, there should be some clarifications about copyright, but the old principles work surprisingly well in the new medium. Anybody who says you have to start over, I don't agree with that. John says, will it be possible to maintain our privacy in a digital world? Bill Gates says, privacy is an interesting issue. I think people are a little naive about how much data exists about them electronically today. Some countries are already issuing these smart cards with all your vital information on them. You use them to claim medical benefits, to vote, to identify yourself to the bank, and so on. John says, sounds Orwellian. And then Bill Gates says, the degree of privacy afforded each individual will always be a political decision. It's a decision for each society. The U.S. is the ultimate we believe in the privacy country. So the government will probably never issue smart cards unless you get them up with a plague and you fucking force it down their fucking throat in a tattoo. Just saying. I'm digressing. At the same time, attitudes can change. See? Attitudes can change. Bill Gates is going to figure out a way to get Americans used to the idea of having Orwellian smart cards. If, for example, the U.S. went through a terrible period of terrorism, people might decide to draw the line about privacy a little differently. 4 years before 9/11, he said that. 2 years before John dies in a bizarro plane crash. Don't get me started. Go watch Dark Legacies, I think it's called. Dark Legacies Part 2? Is that what it's called? I think it's Dark Legacies Part 2. Okay, back to the interview. John Kennedy Jr. says, speaking of the government, do you think that the antitrust investigations brought against Microsoft are fair? Bill Gates says, well, the industry we're in is very important. We've been immensely successful, so at some point it was going to be worthwhile for the government to look at our industry. We don't have any issue with the way the laws are written or given with the idea that the very successful companies like ours are going to be looked into. What's interesting is that in terms of power in the marketplace, none of us in the world of high technology have that kind of power, say, that Coke has in the soft drink market. In our business, not even the most successful companies like IBM or Microsoft can stand still. If we stand still, we're going to get replaced pretty quickly. Our business is less forgiving than others, and that I can think of. We reached a consent decree with the Justice Department freely and fairly, and we're perfectly satisfied with what came out of that. But as long as we are successful, competitors will try to exploit the situation and try to hobble us as a competitor. And then in parentheses it says, after protracted negotiations, Microsoft signed a consent decree with the Department of Justice in July 1994 to settle charges of antitrust violations. The company agreed to monitor itself primarily to consider whether new acquisitions would lead Microsoft to further dominate the software market and to create the acquisition if it would. To cease the acquisition if it would. John Kennedy Jr. asks him, what about the criticism that Microsoft's dominant position in the industry is anti-competitive and that the industry should be recognized so 1,000 flowers can bloom instead of one big tree that dwarfs everything else? Anybody who would say that doesn't understand our business. There are more new companies created in our industry than all the other industries put together. But and then John says, wouldn't the competition and variety be even greater in the PC industry without a dominant player like Microsoft? Bill Gates says, no. Someone had to come in and play the role that we play. That is, create the standards and re-evangelize the platform. We are 100 times more software. Why are there 100 times more software companies today than before? It's because they're writing software for a standard environment that Microsoft created. Why are there so many hardware companies offering these choices? Because there's a standard hardware environment that we created. John Kennedy Jr. says, how do you respond to the criticism that basically Microsoft behaves toward new entries into the field the way IBM behaved when Microsoft was just getting started? Your early success was predicated on maintaining an open software environment, promoting the compatibility of your products with other products. But now that you are a market leader, some are saying you advocate a closed software architecture. Bill Gates answers, the word open is just an abused word. It started out as a slogan for workstation vendors. What counts are innovative software products that work well with what people have. So we make sure we gave you what you have, and now everybody's got to work with what we give you. We and other companies created the current computer industry regime. You can buy one brand of PC on Monday and another on Tuesday, and your software still works and you get a choice. This has made computing very successful, and we're the key element there. So the openness that counts is the basis on which we and everybody else compete. Sorry. And because of our products, we're doing very well in that regime. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that an institution is the lengthened shadow of one man. An institution is the lengthened shadow of one man. In what sense is Microsoft a reflection of you? Bill Gates answers, in the sense that we love great software. We're very optimistic about what software can do. We're very product-oriented. We very much are looking for the new things we can do. It's a bit of an engineering culture here, fairly fast-moving. A lot of companies waste a lot of time congratulating themselves about what's going well. We know who he's talking about. When I sit down and talk about a product, I just focus on the opportunities to make it better. You can save a lot of time that way. Microsoft just entered into a partnership with NBC for a news channel website called MSNBC. You recently launched Slate. I forgot that it was MSNBC because it's Microsoft NBC. I completely, it's been just so, wow. The network that brags, by the way, that they are the network for plutocrats. They have the largest plutocrat audience. I know that for a fact. You've also recently launched Slate. As you get deeper into the information business, will your own views color the content of the news you provide the way Rupert Murdoch has set the News Fox channel up as an antidote for perceived liberal bias in the establishment press? And then Bill Gates says, I'm not interested in doing that. I'm surprised Rupert is able to retain quality people with that approach. That's very dangerous and perhaps inappropriate. He claims he's just reacting, that the rest of the press has a liberal bias. I personally don't see that. The people you hire to be editors and writers, they have to have their own opinions. That's their job. I agree with him there. We agree, Bill. My job is to run a great software company. I'm very careful to keep my political views separate. But do you? Okay, and then John says, why do you keep them separate? Because, Bill Gates says, the alternative is inappropriate. Bill Gates is right. I have my personal views. Then there's Microsoft, a company that gets involved in very few political things. My own views are those you'd expect from somebody who feels like he's been very, very lucky and that the resources under his command are really society's resources. And I have to be clever about how I'm going to funnel those back in. I fund education projects. I fund population control. I fund education projects. I fund population control. I'm very big on the United Way. Something interesting is happening here, but I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Do you mind whether I ask you if you're a Democrat or Republican or independent? That's what John Kennedy asks. And then Bill Gates says, well, he starts a lot of answers. Well, it's a tricky issue because I think that's what he says when he's trying to navigate something. Well, it's a tricky issue because, as I said, I try to keep my political views separate from the company. I went to an event where I said I was a Democrat, and it was covered publicly. When it comes to issues of how business is treated and managed, I wouldn't subscribe a lot of Democratic views. So basically, he's a Republican when it comes to business. When it comes to social issues, you'll find me very much on the Democratic side. And John says, what did you think of Ted Turner's notion that extremely wealthy people like you and billionaire investor Warren Buffett would donate more of your money if someone published the biggest donors similar to Forbes magazine's list of wealthiest individuals? Then Bill Gates says, Ted said some things that just weren't true. He said that Warren and I didn't give money away because we want to be high on the list of the wealthiest. That's just a total fabrication. Warren and I have both said we don't believe our passing huge amounts of wealth to our heirs, and so one way or another my wealth will go to various causes. I think the fascination with wealth is always going to be there. It's unfortunate that it creates a simplistic view of who I am and what I care about. It's sort of an invasion of privacy. I wish the list wasn't there, but hey, what's free about the press if you can't make a list like that, you know? I'm giving away 30... Okay, oh, sorry. So John asks him, so you're planning to give away most of your money when you die? He says, I'm giving away 30 to 40 million a year now. Since 1992, I've donated 200 million to my foundation. So I'm already doing some things, but it's a percentage of my wealth. I'll do most of it when I can put a full-time effort into that. That's the only caveat. My work is now focused on trying to keep Microsoft successful. Then then John Kennedy says, how does the immensity of your wealth affect your life? And then Bill Gates says, it's a very strange thing. I think it's unusual that somebody can have so much money. And then John says, it strikes you as strange? And Bill Gates says, oh, very. Are you kidding? Somebody who has this much money has command on society's resources. In my view, it all comes down to how you use it. So he knows. He's like, I have complete command over everything. Then John says, what do you see on the road ahead for the Microsoft Corporation? Bill Gates says, we're based on a vision of computers becoming an incredible tool for everybody. It's a vision that's far from being realized. Computers can't listen to what you're saying. This is before Alexa. This is before Siri. Computers can't listen to what you're saying. They can't speak to you. They can't see. They don't learn. I mean, computers are still pretty limited today. My entire life has been devoted to the future and to exciting new things that are on the way. There's something called Moore's Laws, which says that basically every 2 years, computers get twice as good. That's a sure thing. Now, one of the reasons I opened this issue up is because there was a pull quote attributed to Bill Gates from this article that is not in this article, and I have to respond right now on Twitter. Okay, so that pull quote is in this issue, but it's on a different page, which is interesting. And the page that it's on doesn't have a fucking number. It is page 74. And it's part of another article. Worst case scenario. An overpopulated planet choked to extinction by a lung-attacking virus. Sound like coronavirus, gang? In the Bill Gates issue of George Magazine. I'll read this article to you. It's a little tiny piece. It's called Disease, Killer Cooties by Arno Carlin. It'd be interesting to see who this person is. Now, 25 years ago, many experts said that antibiotics and vaccines would soon make infectious disease a plague of the past. Yet for every disease conquered, such as smallpox, a new one has emerged. AIDS, Lyme disease, Legionnaire's disease, toxic shock syndrome, Ebola fever, E. coli infection, and about a dozen others. And each time a disease has been brought under control, another has resurfaced. Diphtheria in Russia, cholera, Danube hemorrhagic fever in Latin America, malaria, and drug-resistant tuberculosis in American inner cities. New illnesses have a number of sources. Human contact with microbes from other species, AIDS for example, which came from African monkeys, changes in the environment, Lyme disease from reforestation and suburban development, new technology, Legionnaire's disease, and from air conditioning and water heating systems, microbial mutations, toxic shock syndrome, and their adaptation to antibiotics, drug-resistant tuberculosis. For decades to come, the toll of infections will be worst in poor and unstable nations, but new diseases will continue to appear in prosperous ones as they have for decades. America will have aged, and age brings greater risk of infection. America will age, and age brings greater risk of infection. People over 60 will benefit perhaps more than others from advances in medicine, but they will face new threats as well. Cancer treatment and organ transplants will be more successful, although one resulting problem may be greater vulnerability to infections after surgery. As more people live longer, they will spend more time in hospitals and nursing homes, exposed to drug-resistant microbes. Some people have built careers hawking the worst-case scenario, an overpopulated planet being choked to death by lung-attacking Andromeda viruses, for example. Some people have built careers hawking worst-case scenarios as an overpopulated planet being choked to death by lung-attacking Andromeda viruses, for example. Bill Gates made a career talking about vaccines and shit, didn't he? All right, I digress. Back to the article. It's true that frightening global epidemics could arise from a new retrovirus, a killer flu, or an Ebola-type pathogen running out of control. Because our technology and our behavior have sped up microbial evolution, reducing the threat of new plagues will demand thoughtful efforts, slowing population growth, keeping our food and water clean, and setting up a global system to monitor infectious diseases and microbial drug resistance, for instance. Human extinction, however, is unlikely, not least because the human immune system is a marvel of resourcefulness. Infection is a universal fact of nature, and microbes share the environment with us. For some microbes, we are the environment. The greatest threat may not be microbes, but our failure to protect ourselves from what? Okay, let's read this letter. Oh, say, can you see? We should all be concerned about the future because we will have to spend the rest of our lives there. Charles Franklin Kettering. Listen to the speeches of any politician out there, and you're almost assured of hearing at least one reference for the future. After all, we don't seem to want to elect politicians unless they offer a hopeful vision of what lies ahead. But when the future finally comes around to the present, it usually doesn't resemble anything of what we were promised, so we blame the folks in office for fooling us. But we're all responsible, at least as politicians, because we voters set up the rules of the game that scorches us. If you play three-card Monte against someone promising big wins and you lose your shirt, who do you blame? The fellow who scammed you? Or do you blame yourself for being silly enough to believe you'd win? So timely. In this issue, we've tried to provide a rough picture of what you can anticipate in the years to come, in everything from sex to war, the environment to education, so you don't have to rely solely on the words of those who trade you a pair of rose-colored glasses for your vote. After all, it's the new year. The inauguration is just over, and it's time for the stock-taking State of the Union message. If you're like us, you're probably tempted to look beyond the prosaic present and a frigid February and wonder for a moment, what's next? There's something gooey about much of what you read about the future, because it's usually all speculation, unsupported by hard facts. So in this month's survival guide, we tell you how 8 critical political issues will evolve and which people will affect those changes come the year 2020. Holy shit! I'm going to read that again. There's something gooey about much of what you read about the future because it's usually all speculation unsupported by hard facts. So in this month's survival guide, we tell you how 8 critical political issues will evolve and which people will affect all those changes come the year 2020. There's no magic in our choice of year, other than if you're approximately my age, that would be about the time your Social Security checks will, if we keep our current course, bounce. But we have some solutions for that unpleasant possibility, too. Two of the biggest names in the investment industry, Peter Lynch and Peter G. Peterson, explain why the Social Security Trust Fund will go bust, and they offer some practical solutions that could keep it an entitlement for generations to come. Given that a bipartisan blue ribbon panel has been unable to agree on any number of proposed solutions for keeping the fund solvent, the Peter principles are especially topical. As a general rule, beware of those who predict the future. Except, of course, those who study it or own it. In this issue, Edward Tenner, author of a recent book about the revenge effects of technology, talks with Wendell Bell, a futurist professor at Yale University. Carl Sagan looks into the cosmos to imagine a world which he is president. They were never going to let that happen. He loved humanity too much. And Bill Gates answers the looming question: if all politics is local, what happens when we're all connected in the global village? The village. Watch The Prisoner, the show The Prisoner. Back to the letter. Finally, no explanation of the future would be complete without a recitation of the past. We are particularly proud to have in this issue a piece by historian Douglas Brinkley on the final days of the Carter presidency. As Bill Clinton begins his second term, it's worth reflecting on how similarly situated both men were coming into the White House and why their fortunes parted. Each was a popular governor in a southern state who trumpeted his separateness from the Washington political establishment. And though Clinton hints occasionally at a chilly relationship with the Washington elite, stemming from his meteoric rise from humble southern roots, he has forced their acceptance of him by circumstance, if not choice. Forced. He has forced their acceptance of him by circumstance, if not by choice. Carter, we learn, was done in by the very qualities that got him elected in the first place: his unwillingness to play politics the Washington way, his aloofness, and his rigid sense of morality. He was too moral for our country. But today, it's Carter's particular character that has earned him respect as a statesman, which he never enjoyed while president. Isn't that interesting? Again. So we hope you enjoyed George's take on the future. Why not put it in a safe place somewhere and take it out in 20 years? Why not put it in a safe place and take it out in 20 years? To paraphrase a great Englishman, it may not get you what you want, but you just might find it'll get what you need. Rolling Stone, motherfucker! John Kennedy lives on. Oh, come on now. So there you have it. That's everything that is connected to that Poe quote and to the Bill Gates interview in the this issue of George magazine, which is the February. Happy Valentine's. Happy belated Valentine's Day, Johnny. Sorry, John F. Kennedy Jr. He doesn't like when I call him Johnny. He hates John. 1997, February 1997. All right, good night, everybody. I'm going back to bed.